Greetings, everybody. I am the Starving Martian, and today we're going to be taking a look at Pitstop from the incredible Crash Test Dummies toy line put out by Tyco way back in 1991. Now, Pitstop here is, well, he's kind of the unofficial mascot of this channel. Anytime we're showing off anything with firing missiles, I bring Pitstop out and we see if we could knock him down, because that's what crash test dummies are for, you know. But Pitstop is interesting and unique in the world of the crash dummies because he is a Canadian exclusive action figure. This figure was put out by Tyco like the rest of the line, but exclusive in Canada, and you couldn't even buy him in Canadian toy stores at the time. No, he was sold directly through Canadian Tire, which obviously was a tire shop. And if I have any viewers in Canada, let me know. Was it a mechanics? Was it a gas station? But the business itself was definitely called Canadian Tire. It's printed right on his backer board, which we will take a look at in just a moment. So, but before that, let's just check out some of the details on this guy. Obviously, his name is Pitstop. He is dressed in light blue. Let's take a look at some of his detailing. So he's got that blank stare that the crash test dummies all have. He has this mohawk stripe going down the top of his head. He's got those little warning circles on his cheeks. And the crash test dummy logo right there in a sticker on his back. And so there he is in all his jumpsuiting glory. And one thing that you never do get to see in my videos is what happens when you hit this button. I've yet to shoot him with any missiles directly on that sweet spot. So let's see. Some of the Crash Test Dummies, the initial ones that came out, Vince and what was it? Vince and Larry, I think. They were later turned to Slick and Spin for copyright reasons. But they would have two buttons, and you would push them, and their head and arms and legs would all spring out in various directions. This guy here is a little bit different. You push this button here, and ready? Wait for it. Yeah, his head just kind of launches up. It spins a little bit. The box art shows it like doing like full cartwheels, but doesn't really. Kind of rotates back so you can see what's behind him. And then when you push the head back in, you have to kind of spin it to get it into place. The arms and legs, though, do still detach. You just have to use a little bit of force. But you can pull them right off like so. Snap them back on, and they also come apart at the joints. And moving down to the legs, you could just, there, yank him off like that. Now he's an amputee. And this is always fun because you could create, you know, scenes of mass destruction and body parts laying all over the place. The Crash Test Dummies line was really kind of bizarre when you think about it. They are notoriously hard to get standing, partially because of their many joints. You know, when you snap them back into place, you got to make sure they're snapped in all the way. Otherwise, one leg's going to be harder to, you know, get straight than the other. But they're very, they're jointed all over the place. So the arms will rotate all the way around. They got this great bend at the elbow. The legs as well have a good knee bend. So. And again, that's so you can get them to sit inside of the crash test dummy vehicles, the cars, the airplanes, the tractors, and various other crash test dummy vehicles they made that they could drive and smash, and they would fly into pieces along with the dummies, and then collect all the parts. So Pitstop here. Okay, so where did Pitstop come from? He's not an original dummy in the fact that they didn't make a whole new mold for him. He is just a repaint of one of the earlier Crash Test Dummies, a character named Daryl. Daryl, and we'll see his picture in just a minute, was the exact same thing except he wore red, and obviously his name tag said Daryl instead of Pitstop. So Pitstop is the only official new character made from the Daryl mold. Daryl was repainted later in a neonish kind of color. And before the line ended, they were actually going to use the Daryl mold to make a brand new figure, the only female crash test dummy, and it was going to be called Darlene. And I don't know if this was a new character or if Daryl underwent some kind of elective surgery, but Darlene was essentially Daryl, except this mohawk here would have continued down, would have been like a little ponytail. That would have been interesting, but for better or worse, Darlene never appeared. So let's take a look at him with some of the other dummies in the line. I don't have a lot of them. I used to have a lot more. Unfortunately, I have a lot of pieces of them. So unfortunately, what happens with these crash test dummies? Here he is with Spare Tire, another early first generation crash test dummy. Here he is with Bull, who's a later dummy. And this is what I was talking about with the bright neon costumes. They're called Protec suits. And so Daryl eventually got his own Protec suit. I'm almost positive it was the exact same figure, though. It just, you know, a little harder on the eyes. Here he is with little baby crash test dummy here. Skid the Kid, who doesn't want to stand. Yeah, they made a baby crash test dummy. And finally, here he is with Junkman, the villain of the piece. Yeah, so you can see how he scales with the rest of the dummy line. He's slightly taller than Slick and Spin. Mostly just in the neck. He's got a longer neck, and his frame is a little bit narrow. So he's a bit scrawny, but that just kind of sets him apart from the crowd. So let's take a look at his exclusive backer board. Alright, so you can see he is a crash dummy from Dico, and he is from Canadian Tire. Right there. And they had their name put directly on it. So that's kind of cool. It says, don't be a dummy, buckle your safety belt. And since this was sold in Canada, you'll notice that all the text is done in English and also in French. Head spins on impact. And so there you see his head spinning around a lot more than it actually does in the toy. Here's your instructions. And then if we look at the back, here's a picture of Daryl. And you can see that not only did they reuse the figure, but they also reused the artwork. It's the exact same artwork, except he's painted red here instead of blue. The other figures in the line, Slick, Spin, Daryl, Spare Tire, Skid, and Bumper and Hubcat, who I also have floating around somewhere. The vehicles and crash center accessory pieces. And down here is his bio, which I will read to you. Alright, so Pitstop. It says, Pitstop is Slick and Spin's buddy. He is always coming up with new ways to make the crashes more dangerous. Pitstop wants people to remember to use their safety belts. If you can convince one person to buckle up, just one, then all those windshield sandwiches were worth eating. So there you go. There's Pitstop's goal in life, to convince just one person to buckle their safety belts. Now, Pitstop, being a Canadian exclusive, was never featured in any of the crash test dummy merchandise or stories or anything of that nature. There was a couple cartoon videos, one that came packed in with some of the later figures. It's computer generated. It's hilariously bad. I recommend looking it up on YouTube if you can find it. We have also in this channel, and if you haven't seen it already, go take a look, but we've covered the Crash Test Dummy 3-issue comic book series by Harvey Comics. I have a sub-series called Thought Bubbles, where I share my thoughts on various comic books, and I believe the first Thought Bubbles we ever did was on the Crash Test Dummies comic. So you can see I do have a love for these guys. But Pitstop, unfortunately, is not featured at all in either the video or the comic book. So, you know, sad to say, there's little to know about Pitstop except that he wants you to buckle up, and I think all the Crash Dummies generally want that. Also, that he's Canadian. And what that implies about his character, does he live in Canada? He says that he's buddies with Slick and Spin, who apparently do not live in Canada. Maybe he's pen pals. You know, I imagine the Crash Test Dummies have to have some international divisions. I mean, they do test cars in Canada. But, anywho, so this has been a look at Pitstop, the Canadian Crash Test Dummy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It is a unique figure. I picked him up on eBay a number of years ago. I couldn't tell you what I paid for him, but I recall paying not much at all, probably about $15 brand new on card. So even though he was an exclusive, he didn't cost me that much. I can't guarantee he's still that cheap, though. I have noticed a lot of the Crash Test Dummy merchandise getting more and more expensive as the years go by, partially because, you know, these things are over 20, 25 years old. Partially because they all rely on spring mechanisms. I have noticed that some of the Crash Test Dummies that spring apart don't fit together as well as they used to, and don't spring apart as readily as they ought to. And so getting one in a good condition is becoming a little more difficult. But if you could get your hand on Pitstop, I do think he's a worthy addition to your collection, just for the uniqueness of him. So this has been the Starving Martian. Hope you guys enjoyed. We will catch up with you next week with another review. But until then, as I always say, keep watching the skies. Later.